Now we will hear our first student presentation. Group 1, are you ready?
Well, I want to do my presentation on federalism, but my partner's absent. I'm a theater major, so I'll just act out both parts using different voices. Ready? Here goes.
All right, so ready to dive into something kind of huge?
Yeah.
We're talking federalism today.
Yeah, that whole states' rights thing, it's like we learned about it in school, but how does it actually work in the real world? It's like, why can some states legalize marijuana if it's federally illegal?
Yeah.
Or how do they even decide on environmental rules? Who gets to decide?
Yeah, right.
So we're going deep on this one, really digging in.
Okay.
We've got, get this, excerpts from an actual textbook chapter on, wait for it, U.S. government.
Of course, gotta love those.
I know, right? Textbook time. But seriously, this isn't just some boring history lecture, okay?
Right.
This is about the nuts and bolts of how America works, this constant back and forth that honestly shapes our lives more than we realize.
It really does. It really does.
So to kick things off, can you give us a quick Federalism 101? Why'd they even do this whole system?
Okay, so imagine, right, it's the late 1700s. You just fought a revolution against the controlling government, King George, the whole deal.
Right, makes sense.
You don't want another tyrant, right?
No way.
But also you've got this brand new country.
Yeah.
You need some unity, some way to handle national defense, trade, all that.
Okay.
So what do? They create this honestly ingenious system where power is shared between the national government and the states.
Okay.
Trying to balance, keeping everyone together, but also giving individual freedom. It's a tough line.
So it's they made the Constitution, right? That lists out what the federal government gets to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Declaring war, making money, all the big stuff.
The important things.
But then what about everything else?
That's where the 10th Amendment comes in.
Okay.
See, instead of listing every single power the states couldn't have, they flipped it.
Oh, smart.
They said any power not given to the feds, those are reserved for the states or the people.
Okay.
This little amendment, it's of states' rights.
Right.
It's been at the center of so many legal fights throughout history.
Wow. So it's this constant tug of war then, huh?
Exactly. The Constitution's the rope.
And the states and the feds are pulling back and forth.
Yeah, and just like tug of war, it's never really over,
Right. So sometimes the feds get more power, sometimes the states do.
Yeah, it's always going back and forth. That's what makes studying it so interesting.
I'm starting to see that. Okay, so let's get into actual examples of this tug of war.
Okay.
From what I've read, the Supreme Court, they're big players in this whole thing.
Huge. They're like the referees, deciding who gets to do what, based on the Constitution.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. So, for example, there's this case, McCulloch v. Maryland, back in 1819.
Okay.
And it's sort of the simple question. Can a state tax a national bank?
Taxes, banks, riveting stuff.
Right. Yeah. But, there's so much more to it.
I bet.
This wasn't just about money. It was about, challenging the whole idea of federal power,
Okay.
Maryland was saying, hey, creating a national bank, that's not in the Constitution.
Oh, snap.
Right. So they're saying the federal government, they're overstepping.
It's they were all show me the receipts, but with the Constitution.
Right. Exactly.
So what happened? Did the court side with Maryland?
Nope. They went with the federal government.
Oh, really?
And this is where it gets super important.
Okay, lay it on me.
They basically said, look, the Constitution might not literally say Congress can make a bank.
Right.
But it does say they can regulate commerce, coin money, all those things a country needs for its economy.
Makes sense.
And to do that well, a national bank, it wasn't just a good idea. It was necessary and proper.
Necessary and proper. That's serious legal talk right there.
Oh, totally. And that's what solidified this idea of implied powers.
Implied powers. Okay, meaning
Meaning the federal government, they've got powers beyond what's literally written in the Constitution. As long as those powers, they connect back to the main ones,
So it's they have the power to do what they need to do as long as it makes sense.
Exactly.
Wow. So McCulloch v. Maryland, it wasn't just some bank squabble. It was setting the rules for how powerful the feds could be.
Big time.
And that's still relevant today, right? We're still dealing with that.
All the time. Think about healthcare, environmental rules, anything big.
Oh, right.
People who want states to have more power, they'll bring up the 10th Amendment.
Yeah, makes sense.
But those who want the feds involved, they're all about McCulloch v. Maryland.
Because it set a precedent for a strong federal government.
Exactly.
It's kind of wild that a case from 1819 is still shaping things today.
Right. It shows you this stuff. It's not ancient history. It matters.
Totally. Okay, so we've talked about implied powers. Now, what about this Commerce Clause I keep hearing about?
That one's huge, EE.
So it's in the Constitution, right?
Yep.
And it gives Congress the power to, like, regulate commerce among the several states.
That's the one.
Sounds simple on the surface, but...
Right. There's always a but.
Right. Like, it can't just be about selling, like, corn across state lines, right?
Oh, no, not even close.
Okay, so what's the deal then?
Well, over time, that Commerce Clause, it's been used to justify a ton of federal action.
Like, what kind of action?
Everything from, like, breaking up monopolies to even protecting civil rights. You name it.
No way, really?
Oh, yeah. Back in the 60s, they used it for desegregation. Seriously. Like hotels, restaurants, those that serve people traveling between states.
Okay.
They said discrimination that makes people not want to travel hurts business. So it's a commerce issue.
Wow. That's, like, using the Constitution to make things fairer.
Right. Pretty powerful stuff.
But I bet not everyone was happy about that.
Oh, for sure. There were always those saying, hold on what it's for.
Yeah, like we're stretching the meaning too far.
Exactly. And that all kind of came to a head with United States v. Lopez in 1995.
Lopez, that's the guns in schools one, right?
It one and only.
Okay, but how does that connect to, like, buying and selling stuff?
Well, Congress passed this law, the Gun-Free School Zones Act.
Right.
Said having a gun near a school, that's a federal crime.
Okay, makes sense, but...
But where's the commerce there?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It seems kind of far-fetched.
And the Supreme Court, they agreed.
They did.
5-4, they struck down that law.
Wow, so after all that time of the Commerce Clause being used for everything...
They finally put their foot down.
So it's like finding that balance again, right? State versus federal power.
It always comes back to that. And it gets even more complicated when you look at specific areas like the environment.
Okay, environmental policy, that's a big one.
Huge.
Yeah.
You've got stuff like pollution that doesn't care about state lines.
Right, it just goes wherever.
Exactly. So you need nationwide solutions sometimes.
But then states want control too, right?
Of course. Over their land, their industries, it's a tough balance to strike.
So, like, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, those are all federal, right?
Yeah, big federal laws.
Where do they fit into all of this, then?
Well, remember those enumerated powers we talked about?
Yeah, the ones actually listed in the Constitution.
One of them is regulating commerce between states and the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
They've said that means the feds can regulate things that impact commerce, even if it's all happening within one state.
Wait, so if, like, a factory in, say, Michigan pollutes a river that flows into, I don't know, Wisconsin.
Perfect example.
The feds can step in even though the factory itself is just in Michigan.
Bingo. That's the Commerce Clause in action.
Yeah.
It gives the feds some serious power to handle environmental stuff.
That's actually pretty cool, but I'm guessing it doesn't always go smoothly.
You're catching on. There are definitely challenges and arguments about when the feds should step in. Well, for one thing, no problems. They're complicated, like really complicated.
Right. It's not just, like, one thing.
Exactly. You've got air, water, endangered animals, climate change, all this stuff happening at once.
Right. Right.
And figuring out solutions. It means trying to balance, like, federal oversight with letting states do their own thing, too.
Because states know their own land best, right?
Exactly. But then there's enforcement, too.
Oh, right. Like, who's actually making sure the rules are followed?
Yep. The EPA might set, like, these national standards for clean air and water.
Okay.
But actually making sure companies follow them, that often falls on state agencies.
Oh, I see.
And those agencies, they might not have the same priorities or, like, enough money to really do it right.
And then you've got companies themselves, right? They don't always love new rules.
Oh, for sure. They'll say it costs too much, hurts their business, the whole deal.
Yeah. It's like everyone's pulling in a different direction.
Pretty much. And we've seen this happen a lot, like with Obama's Clean Power Plan. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. That was about, like, power plants and pollution.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. It was all about cutting down those carbon emissions, fighting climate change.
Okay.
But a lot of states push back, especially the ones that, like, relied on coal.
Makes sense. It would totally change their economies.
Right. They were worried about jobs, higher energy prices, the whole 9 yards.
So what happened? Did that plan ever actually go through?
It's a long story, but basically, no. It got caught up in court battles.
Oh, wow.
The Supreme Court put it on hold, and then Trump, he just got rid of it when he came in.
It's like a whole political back and forth.
Totally. And it shows how environmental stuff, especially climate change, it gets caught in this federalism fight all the time.
Like no one can agree who's in charge.
And it's not just the environment either. Another big one, marijuana legalization.
Oh, yeah. That's everywhere in the news.
Right. More and more states are saying, yep, it's legal here, even though federally it's still a no-go.
Right. It's enough to make your head spin.
Tell me about it. So you've got state laws saying one thing, federal law another.
So what happens then? Can the feds just, like, shut down all those dispensaries?
Well, they could, but lately they haven't been, you know? Like under Obama, they mostly looked the other way.
Oh, interesting.
But that could change any day depending on who's president, who's running the Justice Department. It's all up in the air.
So it's like this weird limbo where no one knows what the rules really are.
Exactly. And that's federalism for you. These old school ideas from the Constitution clashing with, like, what's happening in society right now.
It's kind of messy, but also kind of fascinating.
Totally. So as we're wrapping up here, what I really want people to take away is this. Federalism, it's not just some boring thing from your textbook. It's happening right now, all around us.
Right. It's like how we decide who has the power to make the rules we all live by.
Exactly. And it's
fine.
always changing, always evolving.
So it's like an ongoing conversation then.
Totally. And one that's super important to be a part of. We got to understand how this stuff works, you know, so we
Yeah.
can decide how we want it to work moving forward.
That's a good point. Like, this affects everyone, whether they realize it or not.
100%.
Well said. Okay, so to everyone listening, here's something to think about. How much power should the federal government have? Why do you think the line is between the feds and the states? Something to chew on, right? Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.